All right, maybe now we can start Q&A session. Yeah.
My name's Kevin Lamb, and I've been in higher ed planning and administration, so I kind of resemble the remarks you were making there earlier about the administration. And I guess my question is for Dr. Khoury. What would you tell the professoriate to do, and what would you tell the administrations to do with regard to creating change cultures in those two spheres of activity?
Well, you know, in our American institutions, particularly the research universities, but also the elite liberal arts colleges as well, we have a system called tenure. So once you're tenured, it's awfully hard to tell faculty what to do. As an administrator, I happen to be on the faculty as well, but once you cross over to the dark side, it's sometimes hard to come back. But so I think it is a two-way street. There is no way, the best ideas, whether we're working internationally or domestically in the United States, still come principally from our faculty with their students. The most creativity, the most innovative activity we do, whether it's in research or in education. In my institution, we try to link the two very tightly. They're coupled, and we're proud of that. It doesn't always work, but the correlation is quite strong. So there's no way an administration succeeds without bringing the faculty along with it. In days gone by, and I can remember those days, the faculty generated most of the ideas and created the, the institutions and projects that I'm trying to describe. Today, it is more and more top-down, which means that we have to create incentive structures that work for the faculty, and that the faculty feel, in the end, that they are able still to pursue the great curiosity problems. That, they're curious. We're curiosity-driven. And if they feel for a moment that it's all about the money and not about curiosity, they will shy away. They will turn away. And it is the art form to persuade them, to get them to persuade themselves, really, that these are, at the end, curiosity-driven projects that, yes, may bring resources into the institution that we would not otherwise be able to give to the faculty, or that the faculty would be able to generate on its own.
Yes, please. Yeah, here, no.
I'm Franny Leotier, a graduate from MIT, and I just wanted to ask first all the panelists. There is this idea that the knowledge economy is transforming the world of production. How would you cut it between the capacity to do and the knowledge to do versus the knowledge to think and analyze? And where does it go in terms of those two extremes in the way you're seeing changes in the workplace and the role of universities in that regard?
I'll try to comment. I try to understand about what you mean by of do and versus think. On one hand, knowledge is everywhere. So the term knowledge economy is a bad term in some way. So you really have to deconstruct it a bit for it to make any sense, because knowledge has been around. There's knowledge in cutting hair. There's knowledge in cutting down trees. There's knowledge in everything. So the knowledge economy, to a certain extent, means more about how knowledge now can be packaged as something that's valuable in itself. And so, for the first time, instead of taking knowledge and putting it into physical things and selling the physical things, now knowledge itself can become a property that can be bought and sold. And that allows for completely new industries to be created. It allows for universities to become places that can make billions of dollars, because they're generating knowledge which they package oftentimes through intellectual property, and then they're able to license it out. So part of the knowledge economy is that the control of knowledge is now the key, as opposed to the control of the factors of production. And that can be good and bad for society. And control can be good and bad in different ways, because it's the control of copyright that allows for open source. So control of intellectual property creates openness. So without intellectual property, you can't have openness either. So it's very much, again, how you ethically handle the situation and what creates the most welfare. You're always going to have physical things. It's just that the people who make the money in the chain will be different. So the people who make the Nike shoes in Indonesia don't make nearly as much money as the people managing the brand of Nike in Oregon. So you have these capabilities, and when something is intellectual, the brand, the technology, the ability to manage it, the value that the intellectual asset has is completely dependent on the capability of the person managing it. It doesn't have a value per se, if you follow me. So of course, all these different complementary assets will be important with production and whatnot. But of course, in the knowledge economy, you both have the knowledge and in the capabilities to manage intellectual assets, but knowledge per se as itself becomes an object that has value. If that helps. So,
Yeah.
This is a time for competition, and so every universities are competing each other. In other words, from our viewpoint, the level of the university are decided based on the ability of the student, graduate student of the universities. If the university can produce, can send the able people, then this university will be valued, esteemed highly. Otherwise, the competition among universities will come to the result of the, what shall I say, minus effect on the future activities of the university. Of course, each person, each company or the business circle are expected to have the best people. That means the flexible people to solve the problem. Problem solution is the necessary capacity for the people who are sent from the university. And this will decide the level of the university.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're an alumna of MIT, you will know our motto is the Latin mens et manus, mind and hand, learning by doing. So whatever you studied there, you probably had a bit of both, I hope. And that model, incidentally, is hardly MIT's invention. It exists more and more in institutions around the world where students are and faculty are not simply doing theory or theorizing, though we don't want to lose our sense of that, but they're applying what they're learning in the workplace, abroad, internships, people bringing back knowledge by doing with their knowledge.
I think also we need to focus on, rather than problem solving, maybe we need to focus on problem finding, because our students keep solving problems, but they can't find problems. They solve. But universities are a very good position at finding problems. A gentleman, yes? Here? Yeah.
Hi, my name is David Matthews from Times Higher Education. It's a question directed at Professor Cowrie. I was quite interested in your argument that universities have been, if I follow it correctly, that universities have been quite conservative. They've been very resilient over the past couple of hundred years. They've survived very well, but now they need to change more rapidly than ever before. What is it about this period of history that means they need to adapt quicker than they have done and can no longer rest on those whatever previous laurels they had? Is it economic? Is it social? Is it technological? Could you explain a bit more about that? It was very interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure there's several ways of cutting into that excellent question. One, universities are not, maybe they never were, but they're no longer an exclusive domain for knowledge creation, okay? In the United States alone, and it's just, you can see this in Europe, increasingly in Asia, even in the Middle East I'm seeing it. More and more institutions that are outside the university are doing the kind of research that allows knowledge to be generated. And they're applying it, sometimes much more effectively than we universities are able to do. They have a better sense of how policy works and how to get at it. So that's just one example. But I think the internet alone, I had just begun to touch on what online education and online research, because the two really will come together at one point. what that is doing to make it very important for universities to act a little more swiftly, take more risks perhaps than we're used to taking, and with all the downside of risk that we have to be very careful about in order to figure out how to preserve ourselves. And we're going to morph into something else, but many of us at the high end of higher education, that is doctoral education and so on, still believe the residential campus is for the future, that it isn't going to disappear, but we've got to figure out how to make sure it doesn't. Otherwise, we're going to go out of business in the way we know universities.
All right. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Halim Al-Qadi. I'm an educator here in Qatar. And I just, perhaps one of the biggest obstacles to creating a culture of change is people. And but people are also the key to creating change culture. So I was just wondering if each of the panelists might be able to give just from their own personal experience with change and creating change culture, how, you know, just how they were able to deal with preparing people for innovation or for change.
So how do you increase readiness for change?
That's a difficult question, of course, and it's different in different places and in different contexts. Sometimes it's good. I know when I was teaching master's level, if you can get a bunch of people together, we ran a program that had between 4 faculties. So we had business students, engineering students, law students, and medical students together. And at any one moment in time, one of those groups was traumatized by what they were being taught. So the lawyers were like, why do we have to do this? And you're giving us too little time, and people are crying because their grades are on the line. But once they get through this kind of trauma, they start to wear this type of interdisciplinariness as a kind of badge of honor. And I think that that's what has to happen in order to get change. You have to kind of inspire people to take on something. Maybe you don't completely tell them what they're in for. Maybe that's kind of the role. But to get people to kind of push through this early stage where change is difficult and start to see that this is actually producing. It's similar to the summer when I was trying to lose weight. I had to keep with it long enough to get past the stage where it actually started to become noticeable and useful, right? So I think that to me, it's all about inspiration. And I think ever since I've been teaching, the content is important, but you have to constantly try to inspire people to do something more than they might necessarily think to do on their own. So it's all about inspiration, in my mind.
Are you gonna?
Just to feed on what Bo has said, feed may not be the right term. If he's dieting, I should do the same. But it's not simply preparedness. That's the hard part, I agree. It's sustainability once you have prepared a cohort of people. How do you not just wait for one opportunity or one crisis to come along and then have to go through that entire process of getting people all marching, hopefully to the same drummer in the right direction, marching together? How can you create a kind of culture that is always prepared, always ready? Not easy at all. I mean, it's hard enough to just get it done once.
Sports that's very interesting is when you often see coaches. As a coach, I get very happy when all of a sudden my teammates explain something as if they were a coach about they get interviewed at the game, and you can see that this has been, that they've internalized it and it's going to be sustainable, as you say, Philip.
Yeah, I want to add a comment. I think it's very important help people face the reality, and most of the change initiatives, they assume that people don't have knowledge. For instance, they smoke and you say smoking is bad. Of course they know smoking is bad. For instance, in my project, in order to help the teachers connect better with students, I make them visit their home, like disadvantaged home. They see the reality where students come from. I think knowledge, just giving information or creating fear doesn't work in any other change initiative. Helping them face the reality, I think, is very important. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Abdul Rahim Al Amin, Al Ghurair University, Dubai. Before I get to my question, I would like to make a small distinction between change and improvement and development. So the way that I see it, change is to do different things, and improvement and development is to do things differently. My question is, do you think in educational institutions, what is needed is a culture of change or a culture of continuous improvement and development? As change might necessitate abandoning what we are doing, but improvement and development is to do what we are doing, but we do it differently. Thank you.
Is the question? Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes by Peter Drucker is, there's nothing worse than doing with great efficiency what should never have been done in the first place. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. You have to understand, in the literature on innovation, the scholars talk about riding two horses. How can you do incremental change and capitalize on your strengths and what you've done, but at the same time think about doing things completely differently. And this is just always a challenge. And it's very difficult. People have been talking about this forever, and it's not that easy. And leadership is important, but even sometimes leaders that do it in one organization aren't able to do it in another. But to keep an eye on both, like you said, to be able to do both and to understand the difference. That is the trick. I wish I could give you the secret sauce for that.
Yeah, there are also questions from tweeters. For instance, what does the developing world have to teach the developed world about a culture of change? Like, I think it's all about, maybe it's assumed that the developed world is teaching developing world, but what they can learn from the developing world.
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have a very good answer for it. But what I've learned over time in my institution is that the most important challenges, problems, where real curiosity lies these days is found not exclusively, but largely in the developing world or in the emerging economies. And so by the very fact that these issues have risen and are rising faster and faster, makes us all, the so-called developed and the so-called developing worlds, need to find some mechanisms for partnerships and collaboration where everyone wins. I mean, where it is not just the big behemoth, the West or the United States coming in and saying, this is the way we're going to learn. It has to be mutual, it has to be interactive, and that in itself will teach us in the West, in the so-called developed world, a lot about how maybe to be better partners than we have proved to be. That's an editorial. In recent times, in recent history.
Mr. Ahmed, did you want to say something?
I have been a long time the member of the Congress, and we think sometimes necessary to have a kind of change of the society system or the taxation system. So this kind of change or the new taxation is necessary from the viewpoint of the benefit of this country. However, in the field of the policy maker, necessary to persuade the people to accept this, to drink the bitter medicine, which is very beneficial to the health, actually. Almost everybody know about it. But almost many people are very reluctant to take this kind of bitter medicine, which is beneficial for health in the long run. However, taste is bitter. And so in that case, leadership is also, of course, necessary, but the persuasion of the people is also necessary. This is one of the major subjects for the policymaker or the leaders of the society should solve to make this society, even in the case of the academic circle, make a progress to the right direction. So it's a kind of leadership and decisive action, not a kind of the intelligence, but a decisive belief is necessary to change the world. In other words, after persuading the people. And to persuade the people, it's necessary to have the belief rather than the knowledge. That's my opinion when we think of improving the society by taking the decisive and effective better way to change the society, or even maybe this can be applied to the, even in the academic circle activities.
Oh, yes, please.
Hi.
You are dying to ask? All right, after, okay.
My name is Michael Andrews. I'm part of the, sorry, I have a bit of a cold. I'm part of the Learner's Voice this year. I'm from the University of the West Indies, and I study medicine. There was a lot of talk about tertiary level education and change and how you can prepare them for change. But I think that early childhood education plays a really critical role in facilitating change in the future, because if you place emphasis on early childhood education, then students are better able to adapt to change because their minds are more open. They have an imagination and they're more creative. And yeah.
Question is? A comment. You want to? Okay. Thank
comment,
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please. No, after. Yeah.
My name is Fuad Amrad, and I'm with the United Nations ASQA. And my question is for Dr. Khouri, who is my friend, and I was a professor at the American University of Beirut for 17 years. He's the chairman of the board. And I want to bring the discussion or the topics home a little bit to the region. What we heard sounds excellent, and I count on the leadership of Dr. Khouri and the leadership of AUB in the region to make a change in the problems we are facing. I mean, in the Arab region, we have over 500 universities. We have researchers and scientists who are publishing over 17,000 publications, Scopus, publications per year, 17,000 per year. And yet, our innovation indicators, patents, and what have you, IP, it's all almost zero. Yet, we don't know how to desalinate our water, even though 70% of the desalination industry is in this region. We don't know how, we have many, many problems. So, this opportunity, this capacity, the professors, the universities, huge numbers, but frozen or doing nothing but publications, because that's how we are measuring our faculty. More publications that are disconnected from this region and not related to our problems. Can you take a leadership position and ask the professors in your university to do more problem solving, innovate, relate, and connect to our regional problems, rather than only publish or perish? Thank you very much.
I learned long ago that trustees should at some time stay out of the business of the academy. But when you're an academic and a trustee, you get a little more involved, maybe more than I should be. This is an enormous question Fuad has asked, frankly. And it is the issue, it is not just limited to the Arab world or the Middle East more widely, it's all over. I'm noticing this in Singapore, the same kind of questions are being raised by stellar academics like yourself. Are we really doing what these societies need as knowledge generators? Are we really making the applications that are necessary, the problem solving that you talk about? I think we need a mix. We need, and the balance needs to shift more in the direction you're pointing to. I agree with you, really. I also know that in this region, which you and I both know quite well, we have yet to produce truly stellar research universities. I know that's very hard to say that, but I mean it. The AUB, of course, may be the greatest of them all, and it's been around longer than the others for the most part, from the 1860s. But we still have a long ways to go. What's happened, alas, is many of the public institutions that were once very strong in this region, in Egypt, in Cairo, in Damascus, in Baghdad, elsewhere, have become factories for mass production of education with very little serious research. And the private institutions that have grown up to try to fill some of the void that we see created by the mass market of the publics are really not very much better, not yet. They could become, but they're much smaller, and they still haven't developed the research bases this region so desperately needs. And we heard a little about it in our first panel this morning. So yes, the shift should be in that direction, but please don't give up the notion of basic research, generalizing principles that will be useful not just for the region, but for the world.
And it raises the question of knowledge for what, I think. Also, Harvard, which has the best economists, lost $10 billion. So you think, how can the best economists lose money like this? And can we, just one last question, or, okay, one last question. Okay. Comment? I mean, you said one last question. All right, if you can be quick, then yes.
Okay, my name is Dr. Mishal Shambri. I'm from King Saud University in Saudi Arabia. Change, when we talk about the change, and we just focus on the region here, let's say in the Arab world, don't you think the change itself, it's not a goal, it's not an end itself? That is, maybe we change for worse, you know. But don't you think what we need is change management or change leadership? That is, it's to be institutional, not led by or run by just individuals. I mean, what we miss here, we just, as we see the Arab Spring, it was a crisis of management. Management the country, and it's a crisis mainly of management. I believe myself, and it's also a question, is it a question of, you know, management of change or change management? Thank you.
Yeah, it's. I think that you're right. Of course, change is a means, right? And I think this is one of the things that we always have to consider. This is one of the things I talk with my group all the time, is that you have to keep the ends in sight, because sometimes you'll start to see the means as ends, because you'll start to see that we're building roads and we're doing things and we're accomplishing a lot of stuff, but these are means for something else, right? And that's why in the mission of our new institution, we state that we're looking to create quality of life. So you always have to keep that in mind. How is it that you're doing is creating a better life for people? How is this impacting? So again, if you get researchers to produce patents, 99% of patents are worthless. So it's not enough just to produce the patents. You have to have the people that can take the ideas and turn them into something. You need the entrepreneurs. But again, like you said, you have to keep what it is you want to have in focus, and then the means on which that you get to that becomes much more clear. Otherwise, change can just send you in any direction. I think it's Alice in Wonderland has a quote that says,
sorry,
if you don't know where you're going, in any direction is good. Right?
There's a question that keeps coming. It seems like universities' innovation is limited to increasing tuition. Do you think, is there another alternative? Very briefly.
This is the only...
This is, yeah. Universities' innovations in education seem to have been limited to increased tuition. Do you see any other alternative to increasing their resources to change?
I'm sure many parents feel that's true, certainly in private institutions and increasingly in public institutions in the United States. So it's hard to argue against it. And we need to make universities more affordable, more accessible. And the two are not actually the same, because accessible means making sure that we're bringing all kinds of diversity into the institution. And of course, financially, it would be nice to make sure that we can support as many of the needy students who are super that we want. But no, I think there are other ways to avoid having to lift tuition. One, I think we could become a lot more efficient in how we administer our universities. That is, the very institutions that we so much love, we don't like to think about reorganizing. Someone mentioned change earlier. I mean, we need to figure out how to make ourselves a lot more efficient in order to save the sorts of monies and not be forced to raise. So that kind, and then we need to learn how to generate resources better than we do. There are two sides of the equation here.
Thank you. Let's hear your comment.
My comment concerns...
microphone, if you can have the mic.
Thank you. Sorry, my name is Altom from Sudan. My comment concerns change in the rather distant future. I'm talking about 2050. By then, it is estimated, as I'm sure most of you know, that the world population will be around 9 billion. And most of these the big population will be in Asia, 2 billion in Africa, and the present West, about 1 billion. So it's not just numbers, but if you look at other important indicators, that standard indicators, GDP, economic growth, expenditure on research and development, etc., there are present trends that show that by 2050, these 7 billions in the present so-called developing countries, it's an expression that I really don't know of any acceptable definition to it. But anyway, they would have overtaken, in terms of these indicators, the present West. So this requires, to me, a significant cultural change in the mindsets of both present so-called developing countries and present developed countries. And just to give one very simple example, and important, I think.
Simple and short example.
Okay, the Western civilization has been dominant for the past, few hundred years. But by then, there must be a new attitude. You know, we'll have a completely new world. How would they, in both parts of the world, you know, how would they cope with this significant change? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Shall we finish, or did you want to say something? All right. Okay. Thank you so much. We will see you around here. Okay, thank you. Bye. And thank you.